lives. Is there anything, I've heard people say this, but I want to kind of get your opinion. Is there anything that you feel is different about this time?
The energy of the young people. I think they are more directed, and I think they know they got a specific axe. And if we take a minute and listen to what the axe is, for example, their school debt, or the debt when they come out of college, because we should have left a better place for young people, and that is not happening. I am concerned about the students that just graduated out of college, where they're going to go when you get 42 million people out of work. So, yes, demonstrations are different, but I think the young people today have a different approach, and we have to respect that approach and give them the tools that they need and to help them create the acts that they want. A lot of times, you had the opportunity to get what you want, but you don't understand what to ask for. I think our job is to help you get the correct acts.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to hand it back over to the chief, but thank you, Dr. Albright and Mr. Ross, for answering my questions. And thank you, Chief, for having me back on the show.
Good to have you back, Aunt Beezy. Good to have you back home.
Yes.
She's like Vegas's child now. So since she is part of the morning show on Power 88 FM here in Vegas, the Wake Up Squad.
The Wake Up Squad. All right. I like that.
Thank you.
The 702 Wake Up Squad on Power 88.
Congratulations, Abisi.
Thank you.
We gave you a little plug there.
Right. But that's going to be 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday, Pacific Standard Time.
and before I ask my next question, we got a comment from Phil who says that we're still fighting because of generational passiveness. The torch was dropped. We just saw it picked up, and let's see, it cuts off here. We just saw it dropped and being picked up, hopefully. And that's a good point. I think a lot of people are hoping that this was sort of the beginning of passing the baton to the next generation of folks that are going to make sure that people can get a decent wage, live in a decent house, and all those things that are part of the American dream. But with that being said, though, Doc, this was a very troubling incident. And as we said later, a lot of things were troubling about this whole thing. I've been in the business for 30 years in law enforcement, between consulting and teaching and as a sworn officer. And I could not watch that whole tape, and I still haven't been able to watch it, of Mr. Floyd's demise. And I think that the part that's troubling everybody, and even some of the more hardcore conservative folk, that we saw a guy calling out for his dead mother. I think that's just, that has really bothered a lot of people. And I think that's one of the things, among others, that just has instilled such passion in the protests. But with that being said, Doc, how long do you think this COVID-19 is going to be with us? And now that so many, well, we'll say millions of people in London and Paris and Pittsburgh and Baltimore and all over the place, what can people do now that so many millions of people were out there in such close quarters? And to add to that, they're taking tear gas and all that stuff is in the air. Can the COVID be transmitted in that fashion? And all those questions, Doc, help us with that.
Okay. Well, easy questions. If you're out there with your nose and mouth exposed, obviously tear gas gets in your eyes, and there are some concerns that the virus may even enter your body through your eyes. In medicine, wow. We not only wear face masks, but we wear eye shields because of infected liquids splashing in your face, could damage your eyes or get your eyes infected. So we may even get to a point where if that investigation proves that, yes, the virus can also enter through your eyes, we may even be going to goggles or glasses or something to shield your eyes as well. Because, wow. As we get more information on the virus, we're going to find more ways to prevent it. Now, in terms of how long will it last, that's a question no one can answer right now. I've heard some people say that it may be like the AIDS virus, which is still with us today. Sure. However, we've developed treatments that can keep it at a level that's undetectable so that people are safe from it, even though it still exists. And if you don't take the medicines or the treatment, you will succumb just like the people earlier. So we're hoping that we get a vaccine and we get treatments. And as we talked about on earlier shows, when you told me that the president is going to have a vaccine out in a month or two, I told him fat chance, because that's not how vaccines are developed. There's just not enough time. And since he has a definite time stamp, that he's trying to get something done by, we were just, or people in the medical community are just hoping that he doesn't put out something that's unsafe and he wipes out a large segment of the population because it hasn't been properly vetted or tested in live humans. So, these are all questions that we don't know the answer to yet. You've heard, by now in the president's addresses earlier, the vaccine would have been out and he'd been shipping it all over the country by now. And you hear rumors that they are testing or whatever, but you don't see any vaccines going out yet. So, we just kind of circle back to what Dr. Fauci and in a lesser degree, Dr. Birx were trying to tell people, but of course they were, trying to be careful not to get fired by the crazy man. So they had to temper what they were saying, but they made Dr. Fauci was very clear. Every time the president said something great, he would come up there and he would tiptoe through it. But he also made you understand that, don't listen to this clown because he's not a doctor and he's not following science. So I think we don't know, the answers to the questions are we don't know how long the virus is going to be here. We've seen today that the virus is spiking in 20 states. And so that the reopening that we all were so cautioned about is giving us the same effect that we expected. So there's not a secret or a surprise, but people are going to be sicker and the hospitals in certain states are filling up. The hospitalizations are increasing. So just as Governor Cuomo and countless others said, if you open this thing up too soon without a plan, you're going to have more cases. And we did that, and now we have more cases. So we shouldn't be surprised or alarmed. We just knew this was going to happen, and now we'll just deal with the consequences.
And of course, there's so many more layers of this whole situation. There is the pending prosecution of these 4 officers. And as you see now, other officers have been charged criminally. And let's go to, for example, in Buffalo, New York, where the 75-year-old gentleman was pushed down to the ground and was bleeding from the head and so forth. And I say that because if those particular prosecutions do not end in the result that the community is satisfied with, and I think we know what that is, I definitely anticipate there will be more protests, and they may even be larger. So I'm going to ask a real silly question. Is there a safe way to protest?
Well, yeah, there's the Martin Luther King model is, they aren't putting dogs and water hoses on us anymore, and we have to be careful, like you said, whether those outside groups are really inspiring or incendiaring the actual looting and violence, setting buildings on fire, that it's not the protesters, and I've seen instances where the protesters stopped people from breaking in stores and creating, unsafe environment and taking the focus off the protest and putting on looting, exactly what some people want to happen. So I think that we need to, there is a safe way to protest. If you could distance yourself, wear a mask and protective equipment, have gloves on, a mask, kind of keep yourself away from being right up on somebody, yeah, you could protest safely. See, the good thing about the protests is that they're outdoors. So the element of the wind blowing and stuff like that is beneficial because it's not in a closed space where the virus can concentrate. So you're in the open air, so you're much less likely to contract the virus if you have on a mask and you're away from people. You have a pretty decent chance.
And I'm also thinking about all of the chemicals that were dispensed, the CNCS, all those pepper ball launches and so forth.
Yeah.
Are the mist and all those clouds, those stink clouds that we'll call them for the sake of this discussion, that contain the CS, the CN, and all those agents, can they possibly carry the particles of the coronavirus into the crowd and into the eyes and so forth and so on? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Yep. So, and you can tell by how those chemicals react. What do? They burn your eyes, they burn your nose, they burn your throat, which means they're being carried into your system. And so the virus could be carried right along with it. Now, how successful, the transmission rate when the virus is mixed with chemicals, because we also know that certain chemicals kill the virus. So, it's an impossibility to know the answer to that. But the possibilities you're asking me about, is it possible? I would say absolutely. But we haven't studied how those chemicals react with the virus, because those chemicals could be lethal to the virus. Sure. So in an indirect way, the president may have been protecting the protesters because of those chemicals kill the virus, in a backhanded way, he may have been doing us a favor. So we just don't know that, though. That would be, a blessing if that were the case, but we just don't know right now. And I'm sure, as a result of these kinds of discussions, somebody will do some testing on the virus to see how it reacts with those chemicals. Maybe he was spraying Lysol in the air.
Yeah.
And so we just don't know yet.
Yeah,
but
sure.
That is a possibility that no one probably thought of. They thought, well, this is all harmful. Well, hey, there's a possibility they may have been helpful. So we just don't know that yet. Sure. And we'll pray for that. But, but as the question was, is there a safe way to protest? Yes. If you don your gear, you are just like you're in a hospital. Uh-huh. You have that same protection. And so far, we know that if the people who are practicing distancing and wearing their PPEs are not getting infected.
Wow. Well, that's great information. And I just hope everyone that's listening, certainly we don't want to break the will of those and discourage people from expressing themselves. But that's why I just wanted them to hear from a medical expert. There are some safe ways to get out there. Obviously, the preferred way is if there's some other ways that you can participate without having to be in such a large gathering. But if that is what is meant to be, hopefully you heard it, to make sure that you practice as much social distancing as possible, wear your gear, wear your mask, some eye protection and those types of things so that you reduce the opportunity for contracting COVID. And that's pretty much all you can do. But again, this goes right back to what I was saying, and I'm going to switch over to you for a minute, Mr. Ross, that this was such a passionate thing to the community that in the midst of a pandemic, people were out there by the thousands wanting their voices heard. And I guess in the short time that we have left, where do we go from here, President Ross? We protested. We've seen the videos. We're all outraged. And outrage has been on both sides of the aisle. We've heard police chiefs all over the country, union chiefs. Everybody has pretty much agreed on this was a horrible thing. Now, the solutions, of course, are creating some points of discussion and disagreement. But the incident itself, I don't think you'll find anyone, with the exception of a few morons, that didn't think that this was a horrible thing. So, with that being said, very quickly, where do we go from here? What things and what tangible actionable things do you see coming from this